welcome back. I'm Connie Sobel, your host of Call to Create, and we are so delighted today to have a different version of being called to create in the business sector. Today we have Dave Finnegan with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Connie. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. It was so fun beforehand. We were sharing Scottish root stories, curly whirlies, and going back to the old country. So fun. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit as we get going. But I will first give you the official bio so you get to know this amazing man. He is a seasoned and successful businessman and human experience collector who dedicated an entire year to exploring the world to gain a deeper understanding of cultures and human experiences. In 2022, he traveled over 130,000 miles, setting foot on every continent, including Antarctica. I want this life, going a whole year of traveling. He hiked on iconic trails such as Kilimanjaro, the Himalayas, Patagonia, and the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. As a diver, he explored some of the world's most beautiful underwater environments, including the Great Barrier Reef, the Red Sea, and the Galapagos Islands. He also, in business, has been an award-winning leader who helped the startup Build-A-Bear company to be able to go from a fledgling enterprise to a worldwide success. Dave was named to the top 100 CIO list by CIO Magazine and was nominated as Innovative CIO of the Year by Retail Information Systems Magazine. And if you are asking yourself the million-dollar question, what's a CIO? It is, Dave?
Chief Information Officer.
Bingo. So put that on your FYI list. We are so excited to chat with him today. He's also a contributing author of 2 books, and his work has also been featured in numerous publications such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Ad Age. We can't wait to hear what he has to say to us today. So we're going to jump right in to kind of get to the roots of this. I saw this thread as I was doing the research. This customer experience, it seems like such a core for you. So let's go back because you've got tech, you've got information systems, you've got customer experience. You don't necessarily think that's all going to go all together. And this is way back in the day. You're working at Novell, you're going to Utah State. Where did this all come from? Was this something you learned in college and it sparked your interest, or was this just you, something that is driving you, this whole customer experience thing?
That's a great question. So years ago, I lived in St. Louis, Missouri for several years, and I was in technology. I worked for a technology consulting company. We were building networks and websites and things like that. And my boss approached me and said, hey, we have this little tiny startup company that needs some help. And they're called Build-A-Bear Workshop. It's a little place where you make your own stuffed animals. This was in the late 90s, by the way. So I thought, okay, that sounds good. I'll go there. And so I walked into the office. It was a single room where the CEO was in the same room. Everybody was in the same room. There's 8 people there. And they were doing everything from like marking up the product and putting price tags on things. There was 4 stores at the time, 1 in St. Louis, the first one, 2 in Chicago, and 1 in Kansas City. And we started talking about technology and what they needed to be put in place. And while we were talking, and while I was talking to the CEO, her name is Maxine Clark. She's an amazing, amazing woman. She had this light in her eyes about what Build-A-Bear was going to be and how it was going to put into the hands of kids the ability to create and express their own creative expression. And so when I experienced it, I thought, okay, there's something magical about this. So one thing led to another, and they hired me actually away from the consulting team to be part of the company. And I remember telling my Scottish mother, I'm going to work for a toy company where you build bears. And she, of course, yeah, what are you saying? And I told her, look, so one of these days, at some point, this name, this brand will be as recognizable as Disney for kids. And then several years later, we were in a meeting actually with the Disney team. We were building a store of the future concept. And we were actually doing plans for a concept that we were doing in China together. And the Disney team presented to us, and they showed all of the kids' brands and brand recognition. And Disney, and right next to it, Build-A-Bear with brand recognition. I was like, okay, now I need to call my mom. And I said, Mom, it's right. it came true. So anyway, that got me started on this journey. My boss was extremely customer oriented, and she taught us so much about the experience itself. And what was interesting about her is that she would have us focus so much on the experience, and she would make sure that that was right first. And once we knew that that was right, then we could talk about the other things that we had to do to make it happen. But it really taught me the importance of, when you start with the customer's perspective and you start with solving problems for the customer and taking care of the customer and connecting with the customer in a meaningful way, then all the other things snap into place. And so while I was there, I was creating a store, the future concept, that was very successful. And one day we were standing in the store. I was standing with a chief operating officer that's over the stores, and we were watching the experience happening in the store. And I remember something that he said that really stuck with me my whole life. You got to remember, Build-A-Bear, the core demographic for Build-A-Bear is a 10-year-old girl. And so if you think about that, a 10-year-old girl is the most connected human in the history of humans, right? Literally born into this generation of being connected and having access to information in a whole unique way. In fact, some studies suggest that kids that are born today, their brains are wired differently because they can find answers to their questions differently, quicker.
That makes sense.
And so we knew that that was really important, and we created this concept that was a combination of digital and in-store experience. And we were standing there watching people go through this experience, and I'd been in the store for hundreds, thousands of times. And my friend said to me, you know, Dave, we get our highest guest satisfaction when one human in the store connects to another human in the store. And I was like, he was totally right. And so this is a kid. They love the interactive digital things that we had created, absolutely loved it. But when that kid walked in and someone greeted them and said, why are you here today? And you're here for your birthday. And they kneeled down at the kid's level and they said, we are so glad that you are here. Off the chart for how meaningful that connection is. And so sometimes when I share that with people, they think I'm anti-digital. I'm not anti-digital. I'm pro-human, and digital we use to make that human connection even more meaningful. That's exactly right. So that was the foundation of my journey into experience and experience officers. And since then, I worked with brands like Disney. I spoke at internal Disney conference. We were helping to plan what Star Wars Land was going to be in the future, and talking about how putting this at the center of the experience, what rapid prototypes of experience would enable. National Geographic and some other brands that we worked with over the years about customer experience. And then most recently left and was the customer experience officer for Orvis, which is a fly fishing brand. And that was a combination of the marketing team and the technology team. So I was technology and I was over all the marketing.
Combining those together, which seems like your sweet spot of taking those two and making it into this yummy combo flavor. You know, when you're talking about Disney and Star Wars Land, so did you do any of the ride details of how to make it an interactive experience?
There's a team inside of Disney called the Imagineers. They design the rides. A lot of people have heard of the Imagineers. Inside of the Imagineers team, there's a special team called the Blue Sky Group. And so the way I think of it is, I think the Imagineers are amazing innovators, and the Blue Sky Group is like the SEAL Team 6 of those Imagineers.
Yes.
So it's an amazing group. And what they were doing is, Disney had just announced Star Wars Land, and they were having a conference inside of Disney in Southern California where they had invited just a few external speakers. And what we were talking about is the focus on experience. I was talking about a store of the future concept and rapid prototyping. They had other speakers speaking about different things. So it was an internal Disney conference with just Disney people. And it was hosted by the Blue Sky Group. So we couldn't take pictures. We couldn't talk about these things. This was probably 15 years ago. It was a long time ago, 10 to 15 years ago. What I found really interesting, though, about that experience is the energy that was there was amazing. And, we would go through these discussions, and then we would sit and we would talk through different experiences that we could create together. And so what was interesting about working with Imagineers is sitting with one of their chief designers. He said, we are not building something that looks like a spaceport. We are building a spaceport. So their belief in what they were building went way beyond just making something look like something. They were building it to be that thing. And so that ability to get that detailed was what makes it magic, and is why they're so good at what they do. So I learned a ton from that, and it was a great experience.
What a life lesson, what education that you received, this hands-on, in the moment, experiential design learning by the experience. I'm just thinking about when we went to Disneyland, my favorite ride was one of those Star Wars rides, and we're in it, and they're like, oh, we're the rebellion. They open the thing, we're the rebellion, we're here to, and I'm like, woohoo! I was totally into it. Every single step of that ride, it was an immersion experience. When you walk out and see like you're in outer space, it was our favorite thing that we talked about. So it's working. That customer experience that was so lasting, and how that connected us as we're trying to fight against the dark side. This is so powerful for someone who is wanting to create an experience. And that's what it's all about. The listeners that are listening, it's not just writing a song or doing a painting or writing a book just to say you did it. It's really the transformative experience that you're trying to give the person who's going to pick that book up or look at that painting, and the purpose that's behind it, of what that's going to do to them, that impact that it's going to have on them. So what a beautiful thing that you're involved in. Now take us through, I'm going to skip forward. You did all kinds of amazing things. You actually were invited to be part of the Wharton School of Business Knowledge Advisory Board. Is that right?
Yeah.
Stunning. Like, this is the most prestigious business school in the world. Take us to that experience. What did you learn from that? Here you've got the Imagineers and you got Blue Sky. You're going into this group of people, and I see again this thread of just people throughout your life, of just this collaborative experience, these pivotal who's that you're having experiences with. Take us to that. What did you learn from that? What did you notice that these people had learned or become? What were some of the successful keys that you saw?
So what it was, the Knowledge at Wharton program is essentially a group of professionals that interface with the Knowledge at Wharton, with the Wharton School of Business and the graduates there. The way I connected there is I was invited to speak at a little conference that they were having at NASDAQ in Times Square in New York. And we were going to meet with the professors, and we were going to talk about different experiences. And I was there with Tom's, and I was there with the CEO of Pepsi and a bunch of other brands. And we were talking about the power of experiences. And I always learned so much from that. I was sitting next to the CMO of Domino's at the time, and we were talking about the effectiveness of marketing and how important storytelling is. He said, he's now the CEO, by the way. He's gone from CMO to be the CEO at Domino's. But he said, when we think about storytelling, we think about customers, we first identify customer tensions, things that customers have in their life where there's tension. And then we use that, we identify that tension, and then we use that to identify innovations or other things that can help to alleviate that tension in someone's life. And so I thought, what an interesting way of solving. This is a pizza, right?
Yeah.
So when it came to solving someone's tension, it would be, how easy was it to get a pizza late night when I'm studying, whatever it was, however they painted the picture. You could text, all of those innovations that came from him. And it's because they start with trying to take care of the customer and identifying what those tensions might be in that customer's life. And so through that experience, it just reinforced to me the importance of listening to the customer and design thinking and starting with the customer's perspective as we go into, planning for businesses and implementing businesses.
So good. And really putting yourself in their shoes, how they feel, what they're dealing with, and how this can benefit and bless their lives, instead of how can we just do better with our stock shares or anything like that. That being able to say that the bottom line, it really is about bettering people's lives. I love this. And I love Domino's. I didn't know until recently that they had such core values in the way that they had come up with their mission statements. I think he was the one that talked about the Sermon on the Mount, and that following that and being able to have that be some of those core values for how they went about it. Chick-fil-A, same thing. He said the best sermon for how to run a Chick-fil-A is Matthew 5-7. I mean, you look at that, and I think it goes hand in hand when you see people whose driver is customer experience and how they really are going to be benefited by it. You see that there's a lot of values that go with that, and it's someone who is being driven by that value base. So let's get to that for just a minute. Here you are, Latter-day Saint, in this, high-tech business world, customer experience, putting it all together. Have you seen how the gospel has helped you make the shifts that you've needed to make, or drop into these experiences? You were going to get an MBA, and then you jumped into this Build-A-Bear, and boom, look at where it led you to. Ended up 400 stores, annual revenue of 400 million. I mean, wow, that is huge to go from 2 to 4 small little stores. The Lord must have led you along as you're having these experiences and dropping into these opportunities. Are any thoughts or experiences coming to mind where you could see the gospel and the Lord was really guiding you in what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look back on things and reflect, you feel like you can see where things happen for a certain reason, and when they're meant to be, you can see how they fall into place. And so that's kind of been the life journey that actually took us to this trip that I'll tell you about here in a few minutes. It's when things are meant to be, they just kind of fall into place. And I strongly believe that values of caring for others and empathy and values of mutual respect and love are universal. They work every country. And there are so many good people in this world that really have those same values, and that knits us together in a really, really unique way. And so I always found that my faith, those values were a foundation for me to relate to others who shared with their same values. And I was always inspired by others and how they would express their faith and how they would be in action with their faith. There's a Zen Buddhist concept. The concept is that you approach things with an open cup so that you can receive. If you approach things with a full cup, like I already have the fullness, I don't need anything else, you're doomed to not learn, and you're doomed to not experience the same as others who are receiving with an open cup and a receiving heart. And so as I've approached situations both professionally and kind of adventure travel, I tried to do that with a cup that was ready to receive what I was going to learn, and not with my own eyes and my own singular perspective. And because of that, it's really, really helped me, because I value lifelong learning. I'm not a lifelong knower, I'm a lifelong learner. And so for me, it never ends. You continually are learning, and by opening yourself up and your heart up and having those values and being okay and comfortable with sharing what that means and being sincere about it, that I found has connected me with others in a really, really unique way, because those values are universal. And so I'll forever be grateful for the path and the things I've learned and the things that have been good and not so good in my life, that have taught me along the path.
I love that. Let's jump right into that travel experience, because wow, to have those experiences and meet so many different people of different cultures and connecting with them in their spaces and in the way that they live and the way that they learn and being open to that. Can you think of a key experience? I'm sure there's so many, it's hard to drill it down, but are there any that come to mind that were really life shifting for you? That here you've got this, the fullness of the gospel, you've got this beautiful life, you've done beautiful, successful things in business, and you're going and traveling and meeting these people in a variety of circumstances. To have those new wow experiences, that's incredible. Was there anything that stood out to you? Sometimes they're in the most sublime ways or the most unexpected ways. Was there anything that comes to mind that this really shifted me?
There are a ton of those kinds of stories.
It's a book. It's gonna be another book.
Yeah, there's so many, but let me tell you, first of all, just briefly the why I even did a journey like this, and then I'll come back to your question. So when I was at Build-A-Bear, we were working with the guys from National Geographic, and we were doing some projects where kids who were doing some meaningful things could enter in a contest to get travel around the world. And we were doing that with National Geographic Kids magazine. And I was sitting in New York next to a guy named Reiner Jens, which is a very National Geographic guy name, right? Reiner Jens.
Yeah, you can almost imagine a camera.
Yes, that's right. He's an awesome guy. And we were talking about the power of traveling and the power of what travel does to a person's heart and their mind. And we were talking about what it means. He disclosed to me that he was leaving National Geographic to take a trip around the world for a year with his kids and his wife. I thought this was the coolest idea ever because of how powerful I believe that was. And not from a vacation perspective, but from an education perspective, I thought, man, what would it do and how would it change you by being able to do that? So I went home from that trip in New York. I remember walking in and telling my wife, Laura, hey, I've got this great idea. Connie, she had the exact same smile that you have on your face. She reminded me that our youngest was in diapers and I have 3 children. The timing wasn't right, but it had planted something in my heart where I knew that kind of education for me was going to be important and something that I wanted to do. So then you fast forward, roughly 20 years later, our company at Orvis was having our best year in the history of Orvis. And we were talking about reorganizing some things. It dawned on me that this was a perfect time to step away and go on this trip. We started at the beginning of 2022. We did it with carry-on backpacks. That was an interesting conversation many times with my wife. There were some tears. About fitting everything into a backpack.
Wait, how old were the kids now?
They're all grown up. So it's just Laura and I. So it was Laura and I that were going to do this together.
Oh, that brave woman.
Yeah, exactly. I have so many stories I could tell, but there's one, just to highlight one to answer your question, to come full circle back to your question.
Cool.
One that was meaningful, that was helpful for me. We were in the foothills of the Himalayas in northern India in a little town called Rishikesh. And Rishikesh is known because the Beatles went there in the 1970s and they wrote some songs. Do you remember that?
Yes. And I remember Ringo said that he took a big suitcase of baked beans. And he said, that's how I got through it, because they ate the weirdest things for him.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the place. So they went and stayed at an ashram in Rishikesh. Anyway, we stayed at an ashram in Rishikesh. And what's interesting about this little town, it's on the banks of the Ganges River. The Ganges River is special for a few reasons. One is further south in the Ganges can be extremely polluted for a bunch of reasons. But here in the foothills, it's a lot closer to its glacial runoff. And so it's beautiful green, emerald green color, and it has little flecks of mica in it and silica. So it's literally sparkly from the runoff and from the glacier that it comes from. The river is a goddess, a true goddess in Hindu religion. And on the banks of this river, as the sun is going down, all the monks come out, they sing and they chant. And then down, they start lighting these oil lamps and they start passing them around to everyone in the community. And as the sun sets, so you're sitting on steps, the sun's going down over the Ganges River, and there's it's sparkling, and there's a statue of Shiva, which is one of their godhead, on the bank of the river. and they raise their lights to the sun as it goes down. And they also make these little boats out of flowers, and they let them go into the river. So all these flowers start floating into the river, and all these lights get raised as the sun sets. And so I was standing there watching this. They were thanking Shiva for the light that he blessed them with that day, that specific day. They recognize that there's light in you, Connie, and there's light in me, and we share light together when we talk. They recognize that there's light that we see in the sky, and that's a blessing to them. And they also recognize the water and the power of the water and its life-giving light. And so what they do every night is they thank God for the light that was given them every day. And I'm standing there thinking, okay, they could have stayed in the temple and been grateful, and they could have had the same ritual. But what they did, interestingly, they came out of the temple. They had this ritual with the community. And when they made their gratitude public, it changed the power of the community for good and for joining together, for connection.
And
Exactly.
they made it an experience. You all came together and connected and deepened those ties through that shared gratitude for a higher purpose.
That's exactly right. And so when I witnessed this, it was powerful. I mean, you could see it on the faces of people who were chanting and they were singing together, and what love that they have, and the feelings when you're walking away from that. It was powerful to those that were standing there, and they shared that gratitude with us. They allowed us to participate. And so it got me thinking about my own life. And I thought, what gratitude rituals do I need to start thinking about where I could be better at this? Where are the simple things in my life that I need to start with gratitude and be grateful for the things that I have, or things that the opportunities or the people, particularly the people. In business, you get super busy. Sometimes it's really easy to overlook stopping and saying, look, I know there's a lot going on, but I want you to know how much this means and how grateful I am that you're here. That, and doing it not just on an email or a text, but publicly thanking people, that's powerful. That unlocks something that creates connection and community. And so it was experiences like that were profound to me and really changed my heart and the way I think about the world. So I thought that this journey would be impactful. It was way, way more than I thought.
That is just profound and so simple in the way we can practice it. I was just thinking, even with what I do, I have other women that were mom Anns, and we help each other. And we realized at one point, because we don't have a lot of time, we'd be like, we've got an hour, we got 3 hours worth to talk about, and then we got carpool, right? So we got an hour, let's get in and let's get it done. And then we realized we are not seeing each other. We're just doing this drive-through living. And said, we're taking the first 10 or 15 minutes. How are you doing? What's wins and learning? And really connecting. And the crazy thing is that we get through more, and we get through it easier, and we're laughing, and it's so much more enjoyable than what we would have done before. And what you're talking about, this customer experience, this life experience, makes me think of It's a Wonderful Life, where you said, is it too much for people to have family life in 2 bedrooms and a good bath? Something that you can live and experience, and not just wait till someday when it gets to this point. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about our listeners, and it really does touch me a lot when I'm thinking about this concept and this lens, that we can look through our daily life, that we don't have to wait. We can have it right now with whatever stage of life we're in, whatever piece or point on the path of this creative journey that our listeners are on or that we're on. We can actually filter it through that right now today, and sure shooting, it's going to be actually take us to better places and connect us with those pivotal people that we would have scurried right past had we not had that experiential lens that you're sharing with us today. I have to tell you, Dave, this has just taken such a different tack than I had planned on or anticipated, but so gorgeous in the things that you've shared and the feeling that has been with this today. I'm sad that we have to wrap up our time because there's so much that you've experienced that I just wish we could sit and just sit around a fire and we could all talk and I could totally pepper your wife with questions of how was it for you? Okay. But maybe that's another podcast part 2. But in closing, is there anything that you would like to share in light of this customer experience whole legacy that you've experienced and now you're turning around and sharing, or have been along the way as well, with our listeners? Is there anything that you feel to leave with them that can help them take the next right step to making that actually a part of their lives?
That is an excellent question. I think one of the things that was most compelling, or something that I learned the most that I want to apply and that we can all apply today, and you'll relate because you're a mom and you've felt this before too. When I was first a dad, my son was little. I remember holding him in my arms and he was looking up at the sky, and I was walking with him in the park, and I remember his face, he watching the leaves on the trees. A very, very simple thing, right? But he was like so engrossed in the tree itself. And so I put his little hand on the bark and I said, "This is bark." He couldn't talk. He was way too small for that. There's no way he understood what I was saying, but I wanted him to remember that his dad loved him. That's what I wanted him to remember. But so he was so mesmerized by this tree that I set him on the ground, and I lay down on the ground and looked at the tree with him. And I remember it was the coolest thing, the bark, the sparkle of the silver and the green and the brown all together, and always moving, constantly moving. And I remember thinking after that experience that my son had given me the gift of seeing the world again from him, right? Because from his little eyes, I could see my life from what he was experiencing. And so as we went on this journey, one of the things that really was impactful for me is I realized that every day was a new eyes experience, because we were experiencing things we'd never seen before, cultures we hadn't seen before. We didn't know languages. We used Google Translate a lot. And we learn every day with these big eyes, like, wow, that is super cool. Or this is, and I'm sure it becomes very commonplace for the people who live there. But for us, it was totally amazing. And I thought about that in reflection as I came home, and I thought, I want to create a life where I always am challenging myself to have those new eyes. And when I go into new circumstances, and when I go with a cup that's ready to receive, and I go into those experiences where I'm looking at it as a new wise person, I learn so much more. And so one of the key things for me that I think we can all do is we can take a step back and have a receiving heart and an ability to say, hey, I can learn from this, and having new eyes as we look at those experiences. And I think, at least for me, when I have done that, that's when I feel most connected. And so that's probably one of the things I think we could all we could all do better every day with that is doing that.
Love what you just shared. And I'm thinking in my own mind, again, creating those rituals, those connections, those touch points where we don't have to go to the Ganges River, but we can lay under a tree, very Georgia O'Keeffe, like look up with our kids or with people next to us and just be present. And it's so absent in our busy, harried, pinball living world today. And to hear this is just like cool, refreshing water, and that reminder of it's at our fingertips. We just have to make that a priority to say, we're going to sit. I'm going to look into your eyes. Absolutely gorgeous. And we can do that right now, right? And making that worldwide traveling experience replicated right here on the daily, right here, wherever you live. Love this. Dave, this has been profound. It's been so beautiful. People are going to want to know more about you. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you and to reach you and connect more with you?
I posted a lot on Exploring Planet Earth 2022 on Instagram, so that's probably the best place to connect.
Awesome. Exploring Planet Earth 2022. Love it. This has been pure joy today. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this beautiful wisdom. Namaste.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. We so appreciate you always being so encouraging and loving what we're sharing. And if you loved this interview today as much as we have enjoyed doing it, check out the other interviews. We have more amazing people: Steve Young, Jane Clayson Johnson, John Heater, aka Napoleon Dynamite, who are sharing their journey and the things that they've learned, the success lessons and the life learning that they can pass on to you so that you can be more successful and have a more meaningful path on your being called to create.